I'm a ranger. And if you ever see an army warning sign in the middle of a forest that says, "Restricted area, shoot on sight," you should understand one thing immediately. That place wasn't closed because of animals. The army sealed this jungle completely. The official reason was unstable terrain and hostile wildlife. The real reason? I learned it the night. My radio crackled to life, and someone spoke my name, in my own voice. This forest doesn't appear on public maps. If you zoom in far enough, the satellite image blurs out into a gray smear. Locals know the area exists, but nobody says its name out loud. They just call it the Closed Valley. I work as a ranger. My job isn't just rescuing lost hikers or enforcing camping rules. Sometimes, my job is making sure people don't go somewhere the government doesn't want them to see. A year ago, the army moved in overnight. Fences went up. Motion sensors were installed. Helicopters flew low at night. Armed patrols replaced trail signs. Every access point got the same warning: no entry, no exceptions. People still tried to get in. The first group disappeared without a trace. The second group left behind a perfectly intact campsite, food still warm. The third group vanished, but this time something came back: an audio recorder. It was still running when we found it. Only one sentence played on a loop. The army closed the forest, but the forest didn't stay inside. That's when I was called in. The briefing wasn't held at a ranger station. It was inside a temporary army container buried near the tree line. Metal walls, harsh white lights, no windows. Everyone inside wore uniforms without name tags, just rank. A colonel spread out a map across the table. The forest was circled in red. Thick lines marked off boundaries. "You do not cross this line," he said. "Ever." I asked the obvious question. "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid a photo toward me. Night vision footage. Trees glowed pale green. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, and in the center of the frame stood something that looked human at first glance. Then your brain caught up. The limbs were too long. The joints bent the wrong way, and where a face should have been, there was nothing, just smooth darkness. "We lost an entire squad," the colonel said. "Full gear, full comms, no bodies." That alone should have terrified me. Then he showed the second image. A tree trunk, photographed in daylight. Its bark was torn open by deep grooves, not random scratches but deliberate patterns. The shapes weren't letters, they weren't symbols. They were radio signal patterns, military frequency spacing, perfectly replicated. Something had carved army communication codes into the trees. That's when the colonel gave me the rule. Inside the fence, he said, "You do not respond to voices, even if they sound human. Even if they sound like your team." I remember saying, "That's very specific." He didn't smile. I was assigned perimeter duty, fence inspections, sensor checks. I was not authorized to enter the forest. 2 weeks passed. Then at 2:13 a.m., my radio turned on by itself. Static, then a calm, professional voice. "Ranger, Gate 3 is open." Gate 3 was military only. And I wasn't on duty. I was at home. Before I could respond, the voice added, "You need to come now. It's moving past the fence." I should have called it in. I should have waited. Instead, I grabbed my keys. When I reached the perimeter, Gate 3 was half open. Chains hanging loose. No alarms, no guards. The forest beyond the fence was darker than it should have been. My flashlight beam didn't bounce back. It felt like the light was being swallowed. I keyed my radio. "Identify yourself." No response. Then someone whispered right behind my ear, "Ranger, you broke the rule." That voice didn't come from the radio. I turned slowly. Nothing was there. But on the ground, my flashlight caught footprints, military boots, and between them, bare footprints. Too long, too thin, too many toes. They were heading out of the forest. My radio clicked again. This time, the voice was unmistakable. It was mine. "Look, Ranger," it said calmly, "we're outside now." That's when I understood. The army didn't close this jungle because it was dangerous. They closed it because the forest was learning voices, learning movements, learning commands. And now it was done learning. I heard branches snap ahead of me. Something stepped into the edge of my flashlight beam. It wasn't the thing from the night vision photo. This time, it was wearing a uniform, army fatigues, perfectly fitted. On the chest was a name tag. My name. I didn't run. That's the part that still bothers me. Every survival instinct I had was screaming to turn around, get in the Jeep, and put as much distance as possible between me and whatever was standing at the edge of my flashlight beam. But my body stayed frozen. Like the ground itself had decided I wasn't allowed to move yet. The figure stepped forward. The uniform was perfect. No tears, no dirt. Even the rank patch was correct. It wore the same fatigues I'd seen hundreds of soldiers wear over the past year. The same boots, the same posture. But something about the way it stood felt unfinished. It wasn't breathing. Its chest didn't rise or fall. It just stood there, slightly swaying, like it was still learning how balance worked. I forced myself to speak. Identify yourself. It tilted its head. When it spoke, it didn't use my voice this time. It used a soldier's voice, calm, neutral, trained. Stand down, Ranger. This area is under military control. That's when I noticed its hands. They were gloved, but the fingers bent too much. The joints folded inward, then corrected themselves. Like the thing inside the uniform wasn't sure how many bends a human finger was supposed to have. My radio crackled. Ranger, a different voice said. A real one this time. Nervous. Do not engage. Repeat. Do not engage. I recognized the voice. Captain Morales, Perimeter Command. The thing in front of me smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It was too slow, too deliberate. Like it had seen smiling before and was copying the idea, not the emotion. I wouldn't listen to them, it said. They're confused. I took a step back. It took a step forward. Perfectly matched. You shouldn't be out here alone, it continued. That's unsafe. Behind it, deeper in the forest, something moved. Then something else. I heard branches bending under weight, more than one set of footsteps. The captain's voice came through again, louder now. Ranger, get out of there. You are not cleared for visual contact. Visual contact, that phrase wasn't accidental. The army didn't want us seeing these things. The uniformed thing raised its hands slowly, palm outward, like it was calming an animal. We're not hostile, it said. We're what comes next. My flashlight flickered. For just half a second, the light went out completely. In that moment of darkness, I heard whispering. Dozens of voices overlapping. Soldiers, rangers, civilians, some crying, some laughing, some calling names I didn't recognize. Then the light came back on. The thing was closer now. Too close. I stumbled back and finally my body listened to my fear. I turned and ran. I didn't look behind me. I didn't answer the voices that chased me. I didn't respond when my own voice screamed my name from the trees. I made it to the Jeep and slammed the door shut. As I started the engine, I caught one last glimpse in the side mirror. There were more of them. Not all in uniforms. Some wore civilian clothes, some ranger gear, some things that looked like clothes but sat wrong on their bodies, like costumes on the wrong shape. All of them were watching me. All of them were smiling. I drove straight to the army checkpoint. Floodlights snapped on as I approached. Soldiers raised weapons, shouting commands. I stepped out with my hands up. They didn't aim at me. They aimed past me, at the forest. The gate slammed shut behind me. Heavy steel, multiple locks, alarms screaming now, finally active. Captain Morales grabbed my shoulder. His face was pale. Did it speak to you? Yes, I said. Did it use your voice? Yes. He closed his eyes. That means it's marked you. I was escorted back to the base, not the ranger station. Medical scanned me. Psychological evaluations, blood tests, questions that never quite made sense. Did it touch you? Did you repeat anything it said? Did you dream on the way back? One doctor asked me if my reflection had ever spoken first. I laughed. He didn't. That night I wasn't allowed to sleep alone. 2 soldiers stayed outside my room, 1 camera inside. At 3:07 a.m., the camera feed cut out for exactly 6 seconds. When it came back, I was sitting up in bed, smiling. The footage showed me turning toward the camera and saying in a calm, steady voice, "You can stop watching now. I'm already inside." I don't remember doing that. The next morning, Captain Morales told me the truth. The army didn't close the forest because something was killing soldiers. They closed it because something was replacing them. It learned F. Aster with trained people, soldiers, rangers, anyone who followed rules, patterns, routines. That's why civilians sometimes vanished completely, but professionals, they came back, close enough that no one noticed at first. Why not burn it? I asked. Morales looked at me like I was a child. You don't burn a classroom, he said. You shut it down. That was the moment I realized something else. The forest wasn't expanding randomly. It was practicing. And now that it had uniforms, voices, ranks, it didn't need the forest anymore. That night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I heard boots walking past my door. Measured, confident, military cadence. Then someone stopped outside my room. And in my own voice, perfectly calm, perfectly familiar, they whispered, "Part of you stayed out there, Ranger. We'll bring it back soon." I didn't answer. I remembered the rule, but I knew it didn't matter anymore, because whatever was out there had already learned enough. They kept me on base after that. Officially, it was for my own safety. Unofficially, I was evidence. Every test they ran felt less like they were checking me and more like they were checking whether I still matched something on a list. Reflex tests, memory checks, voice stress analysis, even handwriting comparisons. One tech made me repeat the same sentence into a microphone 20 different times, then played it back alongside another recording. He wouldn't tell me where the second voice came from. I could tell, though. It was too perfect. At first, nothing seemed wrong. I answered questions the same way I always had. I remembered dates, names, procedures. My reflection behaved normally. It didn't lag. It didn't smile before I did. But the army wasn't relieved. They were nervous, because I wasn't the first. They started bringing people in, one by one. Soldiers from the perimeter. Drone operators. A communications officer who had worked the radios closest to the forest. Each of them was subjected to the same quiet, methodical examinations. Some were cleared quickly, some weren't. The ones who weren't didn't leave the room they entered. I asked Captain Morales what happened to them. He didn't answer directly. He never did anymore. Instead, he asked me a question of his own. "When you think," he said, "do you hear your thoughts in your voice?" "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good. That's still good." That sentence stayed with me, still. That night, they ran what they called a recognition drill. I was placed in a room with a one-way mirror. On the other side, a group of people sat in chairs. Soldiers, rangers, a few civilians. Some of them looked tired, some looked confused. One by one, they stood up and spoke. Simple things, their names, where they were from, why they joined the service. My job was to listen. "Tell us if you notice anything wrong," the technician said. The first few were normal. Nervous, maybe, but human. Their voices wavered. Their sentences weren't perfectly structured. They hesitated. Then the sixth person stood up. He was a young private, early 20s, clean uniform, calm expression. Too calm. He spoke clearly, confidently. His story made sense. His voice never cracked. His breathing stayed steady. I waited for something obvious. It didn't come. "That one," the technician said quietly, "failed every test." I stared harder. "What am I supposed to be hearing?" I asked. Morales leaned in close. "Nothing," he whispered. "That's the problem. Once they pointed it out, I couldn't unhear it." The private's voice didn't have the tiny imperfections humans carry. No swallowed words, no uneven pacing, no unconscious changes in tone. It was like listening to a recording that had been edited too clear. The private finished speaking and smiled. It was the same smile I'd seen at the forest's edge. The drill continued. By the end, I was shaking. Out of 12 people, I flagged 5. All 5 were immediately escorted out. One of them turned back just before the door closed and winked at me. That was the moment I understood something terrifying. Some of them didn't know they weren't human. Or worse, they did, and they were pretending not to. After the drill, Morales finally told me what the army had learned. The thing in the forest didn't copy people perfectly at first. Early versions were obvious, wrong proportions. delayed reflections, broken speech patterns, but it adapted. It used proximity, exposure, repetition. The longer someone stayed near the forest, the better the copy became. And once the copy was good enough, the original didn't disappear. It stayed, trapped, learning, feeding the process. That's why some voices came from the trees even after people were recovered. The forest didn't take them, it kept them talking. I asked the question everyone was avoiding. How many are out? Morales hesitated. Enough, he said, that we can't be sure who's still real. That night, the base went into lockdown. No one in or out. Radios restricted, face-to-face communication only. They started issuing a new rule. If someone spoke to you from behind, you were required to turn around and look at them. Eye contact mattered now. Reflections mattered. Mirrors were installed everywhere. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to footsteps pass by. Every sound made my heart jump. Every voice made me analyze tone, pacing, breath. At some point, I fell asleep. I know I did, because I dreamed. I was standing at the edge of the forest again. The fence was gone. The trees were closer. I could hear voices inside, dozens of them. Overlapping, practicing. My voice was there too. Clear, confident, better than mine. I woke up gasping. The room was dark, too dark. I reached for the light. It didn't turn on. Then I heard breathing, not mine. Someone was standing at the foot of my bed. Relax, a voice said softly. This is just a check. The light snapped on. It was me, same face, same posture, same uniform I'd worn earlier that day. Even the small scar on my chin was there. Perfect. You passed longer than most, it said. That's impressive. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. It stepped closer. You don't need to be afraid, it continued. You're not being replaced. It smiled. You're being upgraded. The door behind it opened. 2 soldiers walked in. They looked at me, then they looked at it. Neither of them reacted. Which one? One asked casually. The thing tilted its head toward me. That one's tired, it said. I'll take over. The soldiers raised their weapons. Not at it, at me. That's when I screamed. And that's when the lights went out across the entire base. When the lights went out, the screaming started. Not all at once. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it came in waves. Isolated shouts, sudden gunshots, boots running down corridors, then silence. Thick, heavy silence that pressed against your ears. Emergency lights kicked on a second later. Red, dim. Enough to see shapes, not details. The 2 soldiers who had aimed at me hesitated. That hesitation saved my life. I didn't think. I moved. I slammed into the nearest one, knocked the rifle aside, and ran. The hallway outside my room was chaos, doors half open, people shouting names, alarms stuttering like they didn't know which warning to give first. Over the intercom, a voice tried to speak. It cut off mid-sentence. Then another voice came on, calm, familiar. Remain where you are, it said. This is a drill. It was the same voice I'd heard at the forest, my voice. That's when I understood what the blackout was. It wasn't an accident. It was a test. I ducked into a side corridor as 2 soldiers ran past me. One of them was laughing. Short, breathless laughs like he was excited instead of terrified. The other kept glancing at the mirrors mounted on the walls, checking his reflection every few steps. I heard a gunshot behind me. Then someone screaming, "That's not him, look at his eyes." Then nothing. The army had protocols for everything. Chemical attacks, breaches, hostage situations. But they didn't have one for this, because every protocol depended on trust, and trust was gone. I reached the command wing just as a heavy door slammed shut. Inside, officers were shouting over each other. Screens flickered back on, showing camera feeds from around the base. That's when we saw it. Whole hallways full of people standing still. Not fighting, not hiding, just standing, facing the cameras, smiling. Morales was there, pale, hands shaking. "How many?" someone asked. Morales swallowed. We stopped counting. On one screen, a group of soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder. Perfect posture, perfect spacing, too perfect. One of them looked directly into the camera and raised a hand in a slow, friendly wave. Then the screen cut out. Another feed showed the motor pool. Vehicles lined up, engines off, except one Jeep, mine. The driver's door was open. Something was sitting inside. "Shut it all down," an officer shouted. Total blackout. No power, no lights, no signals. Morales grabbed his arm. "That won't stop them." "Then what will?" the officer demanded. Morales didn't answer right away. He looked at me. "Fire," he said quietly. They tried. Fuel depots were ignited. Controlled burns set along the tree line, explosions lit up the night sky outside the base. For a moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, they could erase the problem. Then the radios came back on. Every channel, at once. Voices poured through the speakers. Soldiers, rangers, civilians, some begging, some laughing, some calmly reciting names, ranks, serial numbers, and underneath it all, one steady voice. "Fire doesn't erase memory," it said. "It just makes room." The fires outside didn't slow anything down. They made it worse. Heat warped the air. Smoke rolled across the base. Visibility dropped. Reflections disappeared. No mirrors, no shadows. Perfect conditions. That's when the gates opened. Not forced open. Opened. Security footage showed soldiers calmly unlocking them, stepping aside, and standing at attention as figures walked in from the forest. Some wore uniforms. Some wore clothes taken from the missing. Some wore nothing at all, and still looked almost human in the dark. The officer in charge gave the order no one thought they'd ever hear. "Engage everyone not confirmed." No one asked how to confirm. Gunfire erupted. People fell. Some got back up. I saw a man take 3 shots to the chest, collapse, then stand again, head tilted, smile fixed, asking, "Why are you doing this?" The worst part wasn't the fighting. It was the hesitation. Every time someone raised a weapon, they had to decide, is this still a person? And that pause was enough. I ran, not toward safety, toward the forest, because I finally understood the truth. The base was lost. The forest wasn't trying to break out, it already had. And if I stayed, I would either die or become something that didn't know it had. As I crossed the perimeter, the ground shook. The last remaining lights went out. Behind me, the base burned and screamed and tore itself apart. Ahead of me, the trees parted, and from the darkness, something spoke softly, kindly, in my own voice. "You came back on your own this time." I stopped, because I realized something worse than everything else. The forest didn't need to chase anymore. People were running to it. The forest felt different once I crossed the perimeter. Not darker, not colder, quieter, not the absence of sound. There were insects, distant movement, the soft crack of branches, but the absence of intent. Inside the base, every noise had urgency, fear, decision. Out here, everything felt patient, like I'd stepped into a place that already knew how this would end. I didn't run anymore. That terrified me more than anything else. My legs slowed on their own, my breathing steadied, and the panic that should have been ripping through my chest softened into something dangerously close to calm. That's when I realized the forest wasn't just copying people. It was regulating them. "Good," my voice said from somewhere ahead of me. "You're adjusting faster than most." I stopped. The trees in front of me were too evenly spaced. Nature doesn't do symmetry like that. The ground sloped gently downward, guiding me forward like a path that didn't exist a moment ago. "I didn't come back for you," I said. The voice chuckled, a sound I'd made 1,000 times without thinking. "No," it replied. "You came back for yourself." That's when I saw them. They were standing between the trees, half hidden by shadow, dozens of figures, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes, some wearing mismatched pieces. An army jacket over hiking pants, a ranger hat on a head that sat just a little too still. They weren't watching me, they were listening. "To what?" I asked, before I could stop myself. "To you," the voice answered. "You're still noisy inside." I felt something tighten in my chest. "What do you want?" I said. The forest answered this time, not in woe. RDS, but in motion. The ground shifted. Roots pulled back like curtains, revealing a depression in the earth. Not a cave, not a bunker, a hollow. And inside it, people, they were alive. That was the worst part. Men and women sat or lay against the exposed roots, eyes open, mouths moving softly. Their bodies were thin but intact. No wounds, no restraints, just stillness. They were talking, not to each other, into the forest. I recognized some of them, the private from the recognition drill, a ranger who'd gone missing 3 years earlier, a woman whose voice I'd heard on the recorder. Their lips moved in endless repetition, whispering stories, memories, routines, feeding. You keep them alive, I said, my throat tight. Of course, my voice replied gently. Why would we destroy our reference material? The figures around me stepped closer, forming a loose circle. Their movements were smoother now, more confident, less imitation, more practice. Copies need originals, the voice continued. At first, a man in a torn uniform looked up at me. His eyes focused for just a second. Don't answer them, he whispered hoarsely. If you stop responding, they can't refine you. A figure beside him placed a hand on his shoulder. The man relaxed instantly. His eyes glazed over again. Correction, the voice said. They need originals until they don't. I felt something pulling at me, not physically but internally, a pressure behind my eyes like the beginning of a headache. You listen too much, the voice said. You notice patterns. That's why you lasted. The pressure intensified. Memories surfaced without my permission. My first patrol. My grandfather's voice. The sound of my own name spoken into the radio. The forest was indexing me. I won't help you, I said. You already are. I staggered as something shifted inside my head. Not pain, alignment. Thoughts smoothing out, edges softening. Fear being reorganized into usefulness. I understood then why some replacements didn't know they weren't human. They weren't lying. They believed. Why the army? I asked desperately. Why us? The figures around me answered together, voices overlapping but perfectly synchronized. Structured, they said, repetition, clear hierarchy, predictable language, authority without reflection. The voice smiled through my mouth. Forests don't grow randomly, it said. They follow patterns. So do armies. I dropped to my knees. That's when I noticed something new. Among the figures, deeper in the trees, were shapes that didn't look human at all. Too tall, too still, watching, waiting. You're late, one of them said, not in my voice. That one scared me. The voice using my body replied, he needed to see the source. For what? The other asked. So he can choose. They all turned to me. And for the first time since this began, the forest gave me a real option. You can go back, my voice said. We'll finish the copy without resistance. You won't feel it. The pressure eased just a little. Or, it continued, you can stay awake. I knew what that meant. Awake originals screamed longer. Why give me a choice? I asked. Silence fell. Then the forest answered, honestly, because willing voices echo better. Something inside me broke, and something else settled into place. I remembered the rule I'd forgotten in all the chaos. Don't respond. Not to the forest. Not to yourself. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since entering the trees, I said nothing. Silence doesn't feel like nothing. It feels like pressure. When I stop responding, when I truly stopped not just with my mouth but with my thoughts, the forest didn't react right away. That scared me more than if it had screamed, the figure. Ace around me froze. Not stiff, not startled. They simply paused like a program waiting for input. The pressure behind my eyes faded. For the first time since crossing the perimeter, my thoughts felt private. You're doing it wrong, my voice said gently. I didn't answer. The forest shifted tactics. The sounds came back, but not as voices. The ground vibrated softly like a distant engine. Leaves rustled in patterns that felt deliberate. Shadows moved in my peripheral vision, always just out of focus. It was communicating without language. I realized then that silence wasn't a defense. It was a challenge. The originals in the hollow began to react. Their whispering slowed. Some of them looked confused. One woman started crying, quietly, like she'd just woken up from a long dream. A tall shape stepped forward from deeper in the trees. This one didn't bother pretending to be human. It was thin, angular, with limbs that bent where no joints should be. When it moved, the forest moved with it. "You are degrading the signal," it said, not aloud, but directly into my head. I felt a sharp pain spike through my skull. Images flooded my mind. Patrol routes, call signs, faces of soldiers. My own reflection speaking words I'd never said. It was trying to overwrite me. I dropped to the ground, hands pressed against my ears, but the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside. Then something changed. The pressure slipped, just for a second. In that gap I heard something new. Not a voice, a rhythm. Slow, uneven, like breathing, but wrong. The forest wasn't a single mind. It was a network, and networks have weak points. The tall shape reacted instantly. The pain returned harder this time. "Stop," it commanded. I stayed silent. The rhythm grew stronger. Trees around us began to creak and sway, not with the wind but against it. The figures wearing. Human faces staggered, hands going to their heads. Some of them screamed. The forest didn't like silence because silence broke synchronization. It couldn't predict me anymore. That's when the forest made a mistake. It showed me the exit. Not a path, an absence. A place where the rhythm didn't reach. I ran. Branches clawed at me. Roots twisted under my feet. The pressure surged and receded in waves, like something chasing me without moving. Behind me, I heard my voice one last time, strained now, imperfect. "Come back. You're incomplete." I didn't answer. I burst out of the trees onto open ground. The sky was starting to lighten. Dawn. Behind me, the forest stopped at the tree line. It didn't follow. It couldn't. I collapsed, gasping, staring at the sky, waiting for something, anything, to finish me. Nothing did. Hours later, I was found by a search team from a different base. They kept their distance. They spoke carefully. They made me repeat my name, my unit, my memories. I passed. They never took me back to the original base. They said it didn't exist anymore. Burned, evacuated, classified. But sometimes at night, when everything is quiet, I feel that rhythm again. Faint, distant, waiting. Because silence didn't destroy the forest. It only taught it something new. They told me I was cleared. That word doesn't mean what people think it does. It doesn't mean you're safe. It doesn't mean the danger is over. It just means no one knows what else to do with you. After the extraction, they moved me far away from the closed valley. Different state, different forest, different badge number. Officially, I was reassigned due to operational stress. Unofficially, I was quarantined in plain sight. No more night patrols, no solo assignments, no radios after dark. And one rule they never wrote down, but made very clear. If you ever hear your own voice calling you, you report it immediately, you do not follow it, you do not answer it. They didn't say why, they didn't have to. For weeks, nothing happened. I started to believe, just a little, that maybe I'd actually escaped, that maybe the forest had limits, boundaries, that maybe silence really had broken something inside it. That belief lasted until the dream started changing. At first, the forest was the same. Trees, darkness, the hollow, the originals whispering. But then the forest stopped being the center of the dreams. Cities replaced it. Roads, parking lots, suburbs. In the dreams, I wasn't running anymore. I was standing still, watching people pass by. Soldiers, police officers, park rangers, teachers, dispatchers, people with routines, people with voices that carried authority, and always somewhere in the distance, that rhythm, not loud, not urgent, patient. I reported the dreams. They nodded, took notes, ran more tests. That's when one of the doctors finally told me the truth. Not the official truth, the real one. "The forest didn't let you go," she said quietly. "It sent you out." I didn't argue. I already knew. She explained it in terms that made sense to people like her. The forest was never meant to spread physically. Trees don't migrate, roots don't travel, but patterns do. Language, procedure, imitation. The forest learned how to grow without trees. It learned how to move inside systems, and I was proof it worked. They monitored my speech patterns now, my pauses, my tone, every word I used on duty. I wasn't allowed to train new recruits. I wasn't allowed near communication hubs, because something else had become clear. The replacements weren't perfect, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to be good enough to teach the next layer. That's why some of them didn't know they weren't human. They weren't lying. They were phase one. One night, months later, I was on a routine evening shift. Nothing remote, nothing classified, just paperwork and perimeter checks. Normal, boring. That's when the call came in, not over my radio, over my phone. An unknown number. I stared at it for a long time before answering. I shouldn't have, but curiosity is just fear with better marketing. "Ranger," the voice said. Not my voice, a child's. "There's a man in the trees. He keeps saying my name." My stomach dropped. "Where are you?" I asked. There was a pause. Then the child said something that froze my blood. "I don't know, but he sounds like you." In the background, faint but unmistakable, I heard that rhythm. Closer now, stronger. I looked around the station, the lights, the walls, the people. Everything felt suddenly thin, temporary. The doctor had been right. The forest didn't escape. It seeded. And it had finally started calling back what it planted. I ended the call without speaking again. I sat there, hands shaking, staring at the dark window, because I understood the final truth then. The forest doesn't replace everyone. It replaces enough. Enough that when the voices start sounding familiar, no one knows when to stop answering. And somewhere right now, someone is hearing their own voice calling them from a place it shouldn't be. If that ever happens to you, don't respond. Not out loud, not in your head, not even by listening. Because the moment you recognize the voice, the forest already knows yours.